Peace, peace, black power, and all that good stuff. This is one and only Constitution Maroon, and we are back again with another live broadcast on behalf of Team O.S.I.R.I.S. We actually have a dynamic broadcast today. We're going to be talking about the Maroons. We had a discussion prior with the brother from O.S.I.R.I.S Squad, O.S.I.R.I.S Squad Up. From our great matrix of brothers and, of course, sisters with Team O.S.I.R.I.S. A discussion that the brother Garfield O.S.I.R.I.S and the brother Ishmael Bey had spoke about in regards to the Maroons of Jamaica. And are these Maroons Moors? Better yet, who are the Moors? What are the Moors? These are questions that have been posed in a great discussion that was had between Brother Garfield of Team O.S.I.R.I.S and Brother Ishmael Bey, founder of O.S.I.R.I.S Squad, co-founder of O.S.I.R.I.S Squad. It was a great conversation. It opened up a lot of windows. I won't give my personal opinion on the discussion. I don't even know if it was a debate. I want to say more so a discussion. There were some things that were brought out that needed to be discussed. And we have today, this afternoon, Brother Garfield O.S.I.R.I.S, who is quite the historian. You know, he knows a lot in theological studies, historiological studies around theology, very well equipped. We're very proud that he's part of our team. And shout out to the Dagger Squad, everybody in the Dagger Squad. You know, peace and love to all them cats too. They're no joke either. Make sure you check them out. I'm sure Garfield will be talking about them soon. So shout out to all the members of the Dagger Squad. And peace and love to all the audience out there that's listening today. Much appreciation, and keep giving us support. You know, we truly appreciate it. So without further ado, what I want to do is get right to the chase. The brother has limited time. I'll turn the floor over to Brother Garfield. So, Brother Garfield, are you there?
Yo, peace and blessings, black power to everybody there, black African power. I want to give a shout out to my my Moorish family. I want to give a shout out to my of course my Maroon family. I should give a shout out to them first. You know, peace and blessings to them. Galapu palapu. And I want to give a shout out to the regular Islamic Muslim family. I want to give a shout out to the Hebrew Israelites. Peace and love, peace and blessings. I also want to give a shout out to the O.S.I.R.I.S Squad. I want to give a shout out to Team O.S.I.R.I.S. Of course, to the Dagger Squad. Give a shout out to my brothers Maroon, Alan Brown, and to my brother Truth Historian. Before I start, man, we gotta let people know that although we're having a discussion, we do have common goals and a common enemy. And I want to say that, you know, I do believe within my heart that religious teachings and the religious doctrines and the people who we follow have led us to a point where we are at a standstill. We have become a part of a wait and see program. We are waiting for something divine to happen by the God that we believe in. And with this wait, it leaves us stagnant. We might not see it, but we are so stagnant right now, it's ridiculous. If anybody wants to know about my 9-point program, you could inbox me on Facebook, Garfield O.S.I.R.I.S, and I'll let you know what my 9-point program is about. I'm also shooting a documentary, how I'm raising $1 million so that everybody know you could do it by yourself. I'm at $150,000 right now worth of lines of credit cards, and cash, and I'm going to show everybody how they could do it themselves. I'm not charging a fee. I'm just going to show and prove, and show that you can also do what you got to do to start your own business and create your own wealth in this society. I'm also a part of a team that's buying an abandoned town here in the United States. It won't be completely off the grid, but we're definitely going to be way out there as far as going to be a town with like around 20 people. It's not no Dr. York trying to get 1 million people in a place that hold 100 people. Not that type of thing. But we're going to show that, and that's going to be an example for the entire black African nation that's here right now as captives in the hells of North America. All right, whether you call yourself Moor, whether you call yourself Israelite, whether you call yourself Hebrew, whatever you call yourself, we're in a struggle. We have a common enemy, and that's what we can unite on. All right? So before I start, I just wanted to get that out of the way. And the first thing I'm going to do to start about the Maroons and everything, I'm going to get a definition of Moor from my brother from the Amin-Ra squad. He's called O.S.I.R.I.S. And I want to share my screen. Let me share my screen first. All right, so let's get it on. Here we go.
And so with African Americans arriving from all of these different places, we cannot just use one culture and one label, you know, from this area, from these areas to identify with, because it would neglect, you know, all of the other spaces in which, you know, we derive, in those cultures which culminated, which helped to develop the African American, you know, sense of self and cultural nuances and things of that nature. And so when it comes to the question of Moors, for instance, you know, there's very many problems with trying to identify ourselves as Moors. And the same thing could apply to Hebrew Israelites or tribe of Shabazz. You know, with the tribe of Shabazz, it's, you know, we'll get to that later. But, you know, here's some of the fundamental issues with identifying with the Moors. One, the Moors are essentially Berbers, and these are the people of North Africa. And these people were not involved in the transatlantic slave trade in terms of their people being stolen and brought here to the United States. And so with the Moors having their foundation with the Berber people, these are people who were, in the greater sense, unrelated to us. Also, the vast majority of African Americans, and again, I just said that, are not related to the Berbers. Berbers were not calling themselves Moors for the most part, and we'll get into that why. And but the Moors are essentially Muslims and associated with Islam. And so when you hear about this movement of Moors and things of this nature, it's always attached to Islam. And so it's more so a religious movement trying to guise itself as a political sovereignty movement. And so you would not hear, you know, many Moors outside of, you know, and not connected to Islam. Secondly, there's no Moorish language. There's no Moorish religion. There's no indigenous art of Moors. There is no, you can't go to any library and read any grammar book on Moorish language and culture. It is a label that was applied to a people, but they didn't go around, you know, promoting this identity. There's no Moorish script. There's no, you know, there's no Moorish anything. The word Moor doesn't have a meaning, you know, to most folks outside of the Berber language. And we'll get into that a little later. This causes other problems, you know, because no one can agree on what the word Moor means. You ask any Moor, what does Moor mean? And you would get 1,000 answers while only asking maybe 10 people. Because there is no, they have not done the work in trying to ascertain what the word Moor means. And so they're trying to throw this label on us and trying to force us and try to argue that we are Moors, but they can't even tell you what the word Moor means. And that's because the word Moor is not attached to a Moorish people in a Moorish language. You know, because you can't show us a Moorish book with a bunch of Moorish words. You can't give us a Moorish grammar. You can't give us what language family the Moors belong to. Because all of this is essentially an Islamic movement. Everything that is associated with the Moors is associated with Arabs, and Islam is Semitic languages. You know, but this concept of Moor, it doesn't exist in real life, and it doesn't matter who you talk to, they will always give you the runaround on what this word Moor means. And then what they also try to do is find any word in the universe that has the letter or the phoneme M and the phoneme R in it and claim that that's what Moor is and that's what the Moor means. And so,
all right, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you, my brother O.S.I.R.I.S. Well said. Let's get to the meaning of Maroons and the root Maronage, because a lot of folks out there, ladies and gentlemen, are saying that Maroon is similar to a word from the word Moor. So let's look at what let me tell you my source here. My source is Oxford Bibliographies, Maroons and Maronage. The term Maroons refers to people who escaped slavery to create independent groups and communities on the outskirts of slave societies. Scholars generally distinguish two kinds of Maronage. Though there's overlap between them, petit Maronage, or running away, refers to a strategy of resistance in which individuals or small groups, for a variety of reasons, escape their plantations for a short period of days or weeks and then return. Then you have the grand Maronage, much less prevalent, and the top.
Hello?
Yes. Refers to people who remove themselves from their plantations permanently. Grand Maronage could be carried out by individuals or small groups, or it could be the result of plantation-wide breakouts, or even colony-wide rebellions, although exact numbers do not exist, and in any event may have been smaller than previously thought. Maroon societies were created throughout the Atlantic world. They were particularly prevalent in areas such as Brazil, Jamaica, and Suriname. Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to concentrate on my home country, which is Jamaica. So we're going to talk about the Maroons there and so forth. All right. The first thing I would like to clear up is the other night we talked about slaves coming from Spain to Jamaica. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no records in the beginning of the 16th century that slaves were directly taken to Jamaica from Spain. So there's no evidence of that. What we have is the possibility of folks coming along on the ships in expeditions of Christopher Columbus and other parties that may have been Moors who came along with the cattle. They also were African slaves. But the point is, we have a gentleman to start off everything here. His name is Nicholas Ovando, and he's who I'm going to bring to the witness stand, my first witness, Nicholas Ovando. All right, let me get to him right now. In my source right here is the Digital History Initiative from Low Country, African Laborers for a New Empire, Iberia Slavery and the Atlantic World. The Early Transatlantic Slave Trade with Nicholas Ovando. A letter, this is basically a letter from the Spanish monarchs Ferdinand and Isabel to Nicholas Ovando, allowing black slaves of African descent to be imported to Hispaniola in 1501. Because there was no trade to Jamaica at this time. At this time in 1501, which we talked about the other night, Christopher Columbus was actually still in Jamaica, trying to negotiate and trying to figure out what Jamaica has to offer. So Nicholas Ovando was like the first governor for the Spanish folks to deal with the folks in the Atlantic slave trade, as far as in the Atlantic, as far as the Caribbean. Nicholas Ovando was the first political leader to oversee the transatlantic slave trade to the Americas when he imported black slaves from Spain to the island of Hispaniola. Listen carefully now. Ovando was the third governor of the Indies, as Spanish documents typically refer to Spain's American colonies. After Christopher Columbus and Francisco de Bobadilla and assumed his post in 1502, the Catholic monarchs charged Ovando with indoctrinating American Indians, noting that as recent converts, they should not be allowed contact with Muslims, Jews, or Protestants. The monarchs therefore banned North African Moorish slaves from being transported to the New World, but allowed black slaves and other slaves who were born under Christian dominion, presumably meaning those born in Spain or Portugal, while the original 1501 charter between the Spanish crown and Ovando left open the possibility that some slaves shipped across the Atlantic might not be of African descent. Every subsequent letter exchanged between Ovando and Spain after 1502 referred to the slaves exclusively as Negroes or blacks. Now, another problem that developed, ladies and gentlemen, Ovando at first resisted. He didn't want Spain to be a part of any transatlantic slave, because Spain did not have ports for ships to trade and go back and forth. So what Spain decided to do is they would hire enter the contracts with independent contractors to send slaves into their colonies. All right, we're going to get to that in a minute. But when the first slaves arrived in Hispaniola, some quickly escaped into the mountains and began launching raids against Spanish settlements. In 1503, Ovando even petitioned the Spanish government to ban the transatlantic slave trade, arguing that if more black slaves escaped, they might incite the Amerindians into open revolt. The governor had good reason to be concerned. Not long afterwards, the island saw a major indigenous uprising known as the Enriquez Revolt, 1519 to 1533. The revolt overlapped with a period of increasing African resistance and may have involved some collusion with enslaved Africans. It's important, again, the source, ladies and gentlemen, is African Labors for a New Empire, Iberia, Slavery and the Atlantic World. The name of the gentleman, again, if you want to Google it, is Nicholas Ovando. Nicholas Ovando. All right. So the next slide I'm going to go to now is is the Gilderman history here. Let me get out of that. And the Gilderman history, the reason why I wanted to bring this up, I brought it up the other day. The reason why I want to bring this particular part up, because not only does it stress though North African, Eastern Mediterranean, and Morisco slaves were common in Iberia, the Spanish crown repeatedly prohibited their transportation to the Americas for fear of spreading Islam to the fledgling colonies. All right. I'm also want to say that the first slave trade voyage, known to have sailed directly from Africa to the Americas, arrived in Santo Domingo on the island of Hispaniola in 1525. All right. Let me see if I'm done here with this. Let me see here. All right. Okay. All right. All right. Let's get out of here. All right. The next step we want to go into is we want to bring to the forefront a gentleman. So we have 1501, and then we talked about during that time period. Now we had what's his name? Columbus still in Jamaica, because they're trying to get everything right as far as what they're going to do with this country. They heard gold was there. What are they going to do? So I bring to the witness stand in 1509. Again, we're talking about Jamaica, not Hispaniola. Jamaica, we didn't have any importation of any slaves yet. So as far as slaves coming from Spain, that's null and void, because there's no slaves yet. They haven't established what they want to do with this beautiful country called Jamaica. Now, listen to what this is from a book called Out of Many One People, The Historical Archaeology of Colonial Jamaica. Spanish Jamaica. Lacking alluvial gold deposits, Jamaica was not settled until 1509, when Juan de Esquivel, the first governor, arrived with 80 colonists. If you notice, it said that what's his name was a governor and all that stuff, you know. But let's just say he's the second governor. Juan de Esquivel, the first governor, arrived with 80 colonists in 1509. The Spanish built their capital of Sevilla La Nueva on the north coast of the island and focused on establishing agriculture and ranching properties in the area to produce supplies for local and regional markets. Now we move 4 more years into 1513. Esquivel reported that the land had been planted with both corn and sugarcane. The first sugar mill on the island, however, was built by Francisco de Garay, the second governor, who arrived on January 1515. If you notice, there's no transportation of slaves yet. To accurately interpret the archaeology of Garay's mill, one must first understand the character of this dynamic individual. Garay was a successful entrepreneur and capitalist, He basically was a guy that they sent into the countries to develop it better. All right. So in late 1514, Garay was appointed as the second governor of Jamaica by King Ferdinand. But before returning to the Indies to take up his position, he entered into a 5-year agreement with his royal patron with regard to economic development of the island. Records show that he purchased 2 lated rigged caravels to transport new colonists, livestock, and African slaves to the island in 1515. Okay, always in search of new business opportunity, he negotiated and obtained a license in 1517 for the settlement of Panuco. Pay attention to the dates, ladies and gentlemen. A yet explored region of the Yucatan, in 1519, Garay not only renewed his agreement with the king for their business ventures on Jamaica, he dispatched a deputy on the first 2 reconnaissance voyages along the coast of Panuco. Okay, all right, so now Despite Garay's apparent lack of commitment to the island, Jamaica was very prosperous under his administration. One of his first official acts after arriving in Jamaica was to undertake an accurate census of the island's Indian population to determine the number of native laborers available for distribution to the colonies on the Spanish system of encomienda. All right, let's take a break from this gentleman here. I'm going to move on to Asiento de Negros. And the reason why I'm bringing that in, because it's overlapping, the information is overlapping, and I need to bring out this 1517, what's going on. The Asiento, between the early 16th and the mid 18th century, an agreement between the Spanish crown and a private person or another sovereign power by which the latter was granted a monopoly in supplying African slaves for the Spanish colonies in the Americas. The contractor agreed to pay a certain amount of money to the crown, which is the Spanish crown, for the monopoly and to deliver a stipulated number of male and female slaves for sale in the American market. So the Americas, not America, but American markets, including in the West Indies and also, which is also considered the Americas, Mexico also. The first such contractor was a Genoese company that in 1517 agreed to supply 1,000 slaves over an 8-year period. All right. In 1528, an agreement was reached with a German firm to supply 4,000 slaves. For this monopoly, the firm paid 20,000 ducats annually to the crown. Each slave was sold at a price not exceeding 45 ducats. All right. Let's talk about the encomienda system. The encomienda system, as I mentioned earlier, was to operate for the benefit of the Indians. And why I bring this up is because there's no black African slaves, whether they're Moors or not, in Jamaica yet. And what's happening, ladies and gentlemen, is that the natives numbered a lot. Some say 6,000 to 10,000. Some say 10,000 to 60,000. So he did a census of them. I don't know. I don't have that information directly, but there's estimates. So let's say there's 60,000 slaves there. Now they had to develop a system how they're going to deal with these people because they gave them some rights. So the encomienda system was to operate for the benefit of the Indians, the natives of Jamaica, called the Taino or the Arawaks as we know them today, providing them with the opportunity to acquire Spanish culture and the Christian religion in return for supplying a moderate amount of labor. In practice, the system was badly abused. The Indians were overworked and ill-fed. Although the Arawak did not accept this treatment without a struggle, the conquistadors easily put down the rebellions. Often with great cruelty, while working for the Spaniards, many Arawaks starved to death. Others committed suicide. Mothers killed their children to spare them the lot of their fathers. In addition, smallpox further decimated the population. By 1535, only a few Arawak were left on the island, and the colonists imported Africans and Indians from other parts of the Caribbean to replace them. All right. Now, Rose sees, all right, let me move on here. All right, let's move on to another program that they have. It's called Repartimiento, which is also called the Mita or the Catiquil in colonial Spanish America, a system by which the crown allowed certain colonists to recruit indigenous people for forced labor. The Repartimiento system, frequently called the Mita in Peru and the Catiquil in the Spanish language corruption of Nahuatl in New Spain, was in operation as early as 1499 and was given definite form about 1575. About 5% of the indigenous peoples in a given district might be subject to labor in mines, and about 10% more for seasonal agriculture. All right. Now we move on to 1543 here. 1543, we had a royal Spanish order of as a royal Spanish order of 1543 explained, in a new land like this one, where the Catholic faith is only recently being sold, it is necessary not to allow to spread there the sect of Mohammed or any other. The Spanish had a particular dread of the native Indians converting. Among other reasons for this was the fact that if Africans who knew about horses converted the Indians and then taught them equine skills, much of the Spaniards' military advantage would have been lost. That the Spanish authorities went on to issue 5 pieces of legislation to keep Muslims out of the New World in the first 50 years of colonization suggests this effort was less than completely successful. That the Northern Europeans, less concerned with Islam, did not even attempt to maintain its ban, meant that Islam was the second monotheism in the Americas. All right, so now we have, this was basically out of the book, Servant of Allah. They did not want Islam in the country. All right. let me back up here for a second. If anybody have any questions in the meantime, if you want to ask any questions, I'm here. We could get it in the meantime while I get some stuff together. All right, so we're dealing with a time period here from 1501, we went all the way to 1543, and now I'm going to go to, let me just give a quick summary of what I have. I wrote a little article the other day on Facebook, when did the slaves arrive in Jamaica? And I wanted to read this. The estimates for the Taino population at the time of the Spanish arrival in the late 1400s vary widely, with the lowest estimates ranging from 6,000 to 9,000 and the highest from 60,000 to 100,000. Taino villages were distributed throughout the island, with the majority situated near the coastline and adjacent to rivers. The Tainos were a seafaring people who relied on fishing to provide a large part of their diet. After defeating the Tainos' initial resistance, Columbus seized the island for Spain. Spain sent, of course, the guy I spoke about, Juan de Esquivel, to establish a settlement. All right. The Spanish established Sevilla la Nueva on the northern part of the island as their first administrative center. Listen to this carefully, ladies and gentlemen. Interest in Jamaica faded when it became obvious there was no gold. So there's no shame in me telling you, these folks didn't want nothing to do with Jamaica, because they wanted to know if they had gold and how they could make money and get money from that to give to the empire. And the island became a backwater in the Spanish Empire, meaning that they didn't really care about it as much as they cared about the other places. All right. As late as the time of the English conquest in 1655, the island remained underdeveloped, keyword, underdeveloped, poor, and sparsely populated. The Spanish lived just above subsistence level, developing a small-scale pig and cattle ranching economy. They also practiced small-scale agriculture, cultivation for domestic consumption and for sale to the few Europe-bound vessels. The Spanish colonists instituted a regime of forced labor of the Taino. Although indigenous peoples in the Spanish colonies were legally exempted from slavery by decree in 1542, the colonists were able to compel the Tainos to work for them under the systems of what I spoke about earlier, encomienda and repartimiento. Overwork in the mines and fields combined with contact with European diseases resulted in the annihilation of Jamaica's indigenous population by the mid-1600s. So first and foremost, they were using the people of the land originally. It wasn't about bringing blacks in and all that stuff, all right? By 1611, Jamaica had a population of 558 black slaves, 107 free black slaves, and between 1,200 and 1,400 Spaniards. This is very important, ladies and gentlemen. Look at this figure again. 1611, Jamaica had a population of 558 slaves, 107 free blacks. Now let's go to one of my first points of hold on a second, what did I do here? Let's look at okay, in the 15 we find it. Okay, so I'm right on point here. Let's go to the Voyage website, ladies and gentlemen. I'm gonna blow this up a little bit so that people on YouTube land could see what I'm talking about directly. This is the Slave Voyages website, all right? And what this basically is doing, this is giving us an idea of how many slaves came into the records of Jamaica during the time period. I want everybody to, let me go back to this side so everybody could see for themselves, so I'm not playing games with nobody on the internet. All right? Look at this carefully, ladies and gentlemen. The first column, the second column, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, 9, 10. So the eighth column is 1581. Let's look at Jamaica, where they have records that these people from Emory University, and shout out to the truth historian who also helped out with the work from this website, Slave Voyages. Let's move on to my beautiful country, Jamaica, and let's look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We see 188 African slaves imported. All right. Now we see, skip the next level, and we go to 705. 705 and 188 is practically about 893. Now look at the figures again, what I just read about the Jamaica. By 1611, Jamaica had a population of 558 black slaves and 107, which is totally about 663. So it's not that far off from what Slave Voyages is saying. So this history is not far off. Now, obviously, you're going to have 1,200 and 1,400, between 1,200 and 1,400 Spaniards, because they're bringing in their people to to oversee this great land that they're trying to develop to do whatever they wanted to do, whether it's sugar or cotton or sugarcane industry they're trying to develop. They're bringing in people to put work in. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the other night, someone said that this Marcus Garvey's DNA has Spain and Portugal in the paternal line, I think, or the maternal. I don't remember what was said. But ladies and gentlemen, if the Spaniards came there and they slept with the blacks and the natives, what's wrong with having Spanish DNA in your blood? Am I mistaken for saying that? Consul, are you there? Am I making a mistake with DNA when I say that if the Spanish overseers were sleeping with the blacks, wouldn't we have Spanish DNA, some of us, by chance? So if Marcus Garvey does have, there's no such thing as a Moor DNA, by the way, which is so ridiculous. So the argument is that he's a Moor based on the fact that part of his DNA goes to Africa and part goes to Spain and Portugal. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if it goes to Spain and Portugal, it's just telling you where the slave master was. So if the Spaniards come to the country, look at this. You have 1,200 to 1,400. You have less than 600 here, less than 200 here, and they are intermingling. These Spanish people, what are they? They are sex-free. They don't have sex. So if they have sex with these people, what is wrong? If they have a girl and it passes on and on, or if they have a guy and a boy baby and it carries on, the DNA carry on as far as going back to the Spaniards. So Marcus Garvey having Spanish or Portuguese blood does not make him a Moor. And we need to start thinking before we say these things in public, because that doesn't make any sense. There's no such thing, as Brother Ang said the other day, there's no such thing as a Moor DNA. It makes no sense. All right, so let's get back to the slave voyages. And if you look at the slave voyages, ladies and gentlemen, it's almost a perfect match to what the record says from oral tradition and the records that they have in Jamaica. So we need to pay attention. Look, they said no slaves came before this time period. As a matter of fact, I was wrong the other day. I said for the 1570s, I was actually wrong. It was 15, let's go right to the evidence. 1581 to 1590, 188 slaves came to Jamaica. Now, the asiento, ladies and gentlemen, that I talked about earlier, guess what happened? That information, those people were licensed to go to West Africa and bring the slaves from Africa to the Caribbean. So it wasn't from Spain. So where is he getting this information about Moors coming to Jamaica? If someone came along the ship with Columbus as a Moor, 5 or 6 of them, is he saying that those people are the people that would establish to be the Maroons? If they're working along with the slave master anyway? That don't make no sense. You know, and plus they said they didn't want them here, so more than likely they probably didn't even bring Moors along to do the work, bringing over the 1,200 to 1,400 people with the cattle and all that stuff. All right, so I'm through with the database. If anybody have any questions on that, we could always go back to that. All right, let me bring up my next. Oh, and by the way, for folks who talk about DNA, they did do DNA for the people in Trelawney, and guess what? None of their DNA leads back to Spain or Portugal. In fact, they intermingle with East Indians when the East Indians came over, and they also have, of course, go back to West Africa. So if you want to go with DNA, they did DNA with the town people, and that's where they traced it back. So if you want to say it's probably some West African Moors, let's deal with that. And I want to make a statement also as far as that is concerned. If I go to Morocco, ladies and gentlemen, and I have a Jamaican empire, and I force the people to start speaking my Jamaican gypsy language and give them my own religion, does that mean that the people in Morocco are now Jamaicans? No. It doesn't mean that they're Jamaican. They're still Moroccans, but they're now under the supervision of Jamaicans. And if I take over your country, am I going inside to intermingle with the immediate people? No. What I'm doing is I'm going to make sure the chief heads of different organizations is Jamaican so that we could oversee it. It's just like the Assyrians invading Israel or Judah. They never went inside. They deported the people all over, that were there, the priests and the heads of state, they got rid of them and put their people in place. Not the common man, the poor folks like me and you. They're not going to move us, because they could control us with religion. So why move them? Let's get rid of their original religion and give them our religion so we could control them our way. So that don't mean that the Judeans became Assyrians. That don't mean the Israelites became Assyrians because Assyria took over their country. That's the same thing with Moors. If the Moors took over a country, they controlled the main people that was in charge of these different tribes. That's all they did. All right? All right. So let's move on from here. So we have an idea of how many slaves came at a certain time period. So 1655, ladies and gentlemen, we have the British invading Jamaica. Yes, they invaded Jamaica, and this is what led to the beginning of the Maroons. Because guess what? The folks that were in Jamaica, the Arawaks and them, what was left over, mixed with the West Africans that they brought over. And they decided that they were going to fight on the side of the Spaniards to keep the British out. They failed. The British came, guns blazing, took over the country. Spanish had to run out of town before sundown. And then, you know, different things came in place. So the British now, they knew what was going on. So guess what? They had, the brother talked about a 1663 treaty that the Maroons, the runaways, and that's all Maroons is, brothers and sisters. Maroons are those people that run away from being under slavery and just gone to their own spot, and they chilling and they gonna live there. And they running, come into town, steal stuff, and fight and shoot people and go back up to where they were living. That's all Maroons are. Let's not get into the name Maroon and if it's related to Moor and all that craziness. It's not about that. It's about people being runaway slaves. That's all it is. You had the field Negro and the house Negro here in America, right? The field Negro is quick to run away. The house Negro want to stay inside and chill with master. The field Negro is quick to run away. He could be a Maroon if he run away here in the United States. It's not just a name just for Jamaicans. So I am not saying Maroons, all Maroons are Jamaicans and all that craziness. No. Some of them are connected because some of the Maroons had the same way and vibes that the Maroons in Jamaica had. They did the same powder stuff. They did the same, they basically did the same rituals. They had a connection with West Africa, Ghana, Akan, Ashanti. So at the end of the day, that's the connection that they might have. But not every Maroon was connected. So just to make that clear. But we're concentrating on Jamaica because that's my country and that's my root. And I'm defending that today. All right? Just to make that clear. So in 1663 now, 8 years after the British took over, they faced with discovery and defeat in 1659. Juan de Bolas allied himself with the British and guided their troops on a raid, which resulted in final expulsion of the Spanish in 1660. In exchange, in 1663, Governor Littleton signed the first Maroon Treaty. Oh, you can't hear? What's going on here? She says she can't hear me. I don't know. Can everybody hear me? Because the sister said she can't hear me. Got to make sure that you guys could hear me. Kansu, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you clear.
She's on the YouTube. Let me put my earpiece in because I don't.
No. People been dropping in and out.
Okay. Okay.
So there's something wrong with the connection.
Okay. So it's not me then. All right. Cool.
No.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, brother. Brother D. I won't call your name out. Brother D. Thanks for that. All right. In 1663, Governor Littleton signed the first Maroon Treaty, granting de Bolas and his people land on the same terms as British settlers. Now, the other night, the brother pointed out that in 1663, right, that he kind of caught me off guard, to be honest, because I didn't have the information that I have today. What happened was he said that there's sellouts in all type of culture because I brought up a brother by the name of Adahu the Moor. And I didn't want to talk about him today, but Adahu, Adahu, the Moor, was one of the brothers that helped foster in the transatlantic slave trade with the Portuguese. He worked out a deal with them to supply Africans for them to trade to Europe and to other places. So he was the one that fostered. He worked out a deal to get free. He said, if you free me, I'll flood the sea coast with Africans, and that's what he did. Hundreds of thousands of Africans were enslaved because of that Moor called Adahu the Moor. So in return, the brother brought up the 1663 treaty to say that Jamaicans, the runaway slaves, were captured. That was a part of the deal of the 1663 treaty. Well, check this out, ladies and gentlemen. In 1663, the Lieutenant Governor, Sir Charles Littleton, and his council issued a proclamation offering a full pardon, 20 acres of land, and freedom from all manner of slavery to each of them who should surrender. But I do not find that any of them were inclined to accept the terms offered or quit their savage way of life. On the contrary, they were better pleased with the more ample range they possessed in the woods, where their hunting grounds were not yet encroached upon by settlements. They took effectual care indeed that no settlement should be established near them, for they butchered every white family that ventured to seat itself any considerable distance inland. When the governor perceived that the proclamation wrought no effect, Juan de Bolas, who was now made colonel of the black regiment, was sent to endeavor their reduction, but in the prosecution of this service, he fell into an ambuscade and was cut to pieces. Woo! That's black power right there, brothers. Black African power right there. In March 1664, Captain Colbeck of the White Militia was employed for the same purpose. He went by sea to the north side, and having gained some advantage over the Maroons, he returned with one who pretended to treat for the rest. This embassy, however, was only calculated to amuse the whites and gain some respite, for the Maroons no sooner found themselves in a condition to act, and the white inhabitants lulled into security, that they began to renew hostilities, murdering as before every white person without distinction of sex or age who came within their reach. In this way, they continued to distress the island for upwards of 40 years, during which time 44 acts of assembly were passed and at least 240,000 expended for their suppression. All right, so they didn't actually give up or dealt with runaway slaves. That's a part of the whole thing that went wrong. I wanted to point out something about the Jamaican Maroon. This is just an article on Wiki. I wanted to point out something that, as we're dealing with the time, and I'm dealing with with chronology, between 1673 and 1690, there were several major slave uprisings, mainly involved newly arrived, highly militarized Coromantee groups. On July 1690, a rebellion involving 500 slaves from the Sutton estate in Clarendon Parish led to the formation of Jamaica's most stable and best organized Maroon group. Although some were killed, recaptured, or surrendered, more than 200 remained free after the rebellion was considered over, including women and children. They established an Ashanti-style polity based on the Eastern Cockpit country. This group centered around Trelawney Town under rulers of whom the most famous was Cudjoe, and only incorporated outsiders following a strict probationary period. It should be noted that Cudjoe is an Akan Day name, assigned to about a seventh of males in Akan-speaking cultures, including several Jamaican Maroon leaders and also to the enslaved population. Another Jamaican Maroon leader was Major Jarrett. The Windward Maroons in the wilder parts of eastern Jamaica were always composed of separate, highly mobile and cultural heterogeneous groups. From early on, their presence was perceived as an impediment to British settlement by the Jamaican governors, who rated them to little effect in 1686 and 1702. By about 1720, a stronger windward focal point had developed around the cultural Africanized group of three villages known as Nanny Town, under the spiritual leadership of Nanny herself, sometimes in allegiance and sometimes in competition with other windward groups. Queen Nanny, also known as Granny Nanny, died in the 1700s, is the only female listed among Jamaica's national heroes. She has been immortalized in songs and legend. She was known for her exceptional leadership skills, especially in guerrilla warfare. The First Maroon War. Her remains are reputedly buried at Bump Grave in Moortown, the main town of the Windward Maroons, who are concentrated in around the Rio Grande Valley in the northeastern parish of Portland. All right, let me address something real carefully here. All right, a lot of folks like to play word games, right? And oh, you know what? Let me go in order. Jerk pork. If these guys were Moors and practicing Muslims, they would know that pork is something they shouldn't touch, they shouldn't be around, and they should leave alone. Let's take a look at the Jerk Pork Connection. This is a book by Bev Carey, but he's the root to my information. but I'm actually going to use a different article instead of his book right now. Let's take a look at this book, this article here. This is called the pimento story. Jamaicans use pimento in almost everything they cook. Meat stews, soups, rice, and peas. And by the way, the jerk part of it has a root with the Arawaks also. So I'm not biased to say everything is the Maroon, and I don't romanticize. I tell the truth. All right? And we need to make that clear. So now the Tainos used to swallow the pimento berries whole for medicinal purposes. The Spaniards later laid claim to this wonderful spice, and just over 500 years ago, it was called pimienta. They thought it was peppercorn. The British later corrupted the Spanish name and called it pimento. They also called it allspice because it had the flavor and aroma of cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg all rolled into one. At one point, it was called English spice. The most exciting aspect of the pimento story is the role it played in the natural history of Jamaica. The Spaniards' release of wild hogs. Wild hogs, ladies and gentlemen, you know what that is. Come on, Muslims, you know what wild hogs is. In the Jamaican countryside centuries ago, created another web in the food chain, and in short order became important game for the Maroons in their mountain strongholds. With the presence of wild herbs and spices, including pimento, along with the wild hogs, ushered in the now popular jerk chicken cuisine. In the book Maroon Story that I just posted before by Bev Carey, the author describes pimento to be an important ingredient in the dry sauce applied to the meat of the wild hogs. Here we go again with them wild hogs. She also describes the barbecue grill used to jerk the hog as lengths of pimento wood, giving the meat that unique and distinct flavor. The meat, of course, is cooked for hours until it is dry, thus enhancing the ability to have a very long shell life. As a matter of fact, the Maroons considered jerk pork to be a very important war food in the old days. Today, jerk cuisine is enjoyed by many all over the world, but it doesn't stop there. The leaves, berries, and all of the pimento tree all play a part in traditional herbal medicine. It is generally used for flatulence, aches, pains, and rheumatism, arthritis, and respiratory problems like bronchitis, chills, coughs, and more. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are seeing evidence of these people applying pork to their daily life. Now, you tell me, is that what Moors do? Is that what people who follow Islam do? Okay. But this is another story about it. You know, some of these slaves, they stay as early as the initial 1655. Jerk originally referred to a currying and drying meat, hence the term jerk. The term derives from Quechua language spoken by the indigenous descendants of Peru. They refer to preserved dried meat as charqui, which was somehow transmitted via the Spanish and the English to jerk. There's another theory that jerk refers to the process of repeatedly flipping grilled meat, that is, jerking it. Even if that's true, repeated flipping is not the proper procedure for grilling. Generally speaking, grilled items are seared, flipped once and then seared on the other. A lot of my Jamaicans right now are watching, and the truth of the matter is, brothers and sisters, jerk pork comes from our people, the Maroons, and partially the Arawaks. All right, so we need to be clear on that. I'm not going to be no romanticizing like they're the only people that lived in the world and say that everything is them. We don't do that. All right. There's something I wanted to bring up. Okay. Yes. I wanted to talk about why Moortown is called Moortown. There's two theories. There's the Lieutenant Governor, Sir Henry Moor, who was attacking the Maroons, originally knew Nanny Town. After this cracker, it became Moortown. That's from my brother. Alan Brown, man, Dagger Squad. But here we have hold on here. Let me see there. Let me see here. Hold on 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. We're doing this smoothly. It's on page 9. All right, page 9. Let's go to page 9 real quickly here so you guys could see the sources. I love to give sources, man. No pseudo here. Moortown. This is page 9. This study was focused on Moortown. So a lot of Moors are saying that the word Moortown comes from the term Moor, but why would they add an E to it? That don't make any sense. So the Englishman named Moor, it's a possibility. I have to give both sides. I'm not going to be no romanticist here. Moortown could come from the Englishman whose name was Moor. So Moortown, the main town of the Windward Maroons, Moortown is one of 10 priority management intervention sites in the park's buffer zone guarded for reforestation and other conservation activities. Moortown was established in 1781 by Grandy Nanny, leader and heroine of the Maroon struggle against the British. The Windward Maroons had their headquarters high in the mountains of Rio Grande, watershed at Nanny Town, in an area that was virtually inaccessible to cumbersome British forces. After 80 years of conflict with the Maroons, in 1734, the British dragged swivel guns up the south side of the mountain and bombarded the settlement, scattering the Maroons and forcing them south. Still, the British could not flush them out, and 5 years later, a peace treaty was signed, giving the undefeated Maroons a semi-independent status that they retain today, as well as 500 acres of land at the damaged Nanny Town site. Some years later, Grandy Nanny requested additional lands to begin a Moortown. Through a series of errors, the name of the settlement was changed to Moortown. Now, Moortown, M-O-R-E, to me makes a lot of sense, because when you're asking for additional town, if you're from Jamaica, you know, it's a Moortown, man. We need more town, more fire, more of this. So Moortown is saying that we need more additional land. So it possibly could mean that, and it possibly could mean from the English guy whose name was Moor. But I'm kind of leaning to this side, because as a Jamaican, I understand. She's trying to say Moortown, we need more town. And over the years, people saying, oh, it's probably, they spelled it, misspelled it, but they didn't understand because of Jamaican patois in the language, Moortown. All right, I hope I'm clear to everybody. And the source, page 9, is the Learning from Maroon Water Resource Management Traditions and Practices in Blue Mountains National Park by Kimberly John. All right, just wanted to make that clear so everybody have that. All right, the next step, let me just move on real quickly here. Talked about the jerk chicken. We're going to talk about the Islamic presence. I'm missing something here. What am I missing? I'm missing something here. All right. Let's talk about the Islamic presence in Jamaica. When we start seeing they bringing over the Mandinka and different tribes, we notice that we start seeing people giving us references and evidence of Islam in Jamaica. I'm not saying there was no Moors, period, ever in Jamaica before this time, but now we start seeing an Islamic presence. And let's take a look at the evidence. All right, this is from a book called The History of the Muslims in Belize. Reverend Bridges, who was in the 19th century, he used to work for them. He used to have a salary, annual salary. One account worthy to be cited here once again was the narration attributed to the accounts of Reverend Bridges, who revealed his anguish over the strong conviction of the Islamic faith of many of the slaves in, for instance, Jamaica, who had been baptized by him, but despite pressure to get them to ditch their age-old practices and faith, kept on bending and resorted to be with Islam, their true religion. This is what he wrote. Amongst the Negroes of Jamaica, who are natives of the northern coast of Africa, many of its institutions may still be traced by the eye of careful observer, and whatever may be the influence of Christianity upon their sable offspring, it is to be feared that they themselves will never change their conduct or their faith. The tribes of Foles, Mandingo, Giolos, and Bambara practice the rite of circumcision and observe the Genti Carafana or Ramadan with much greater respect and awe than they feel when they allow themselves to be sprinkled with the waters of baptism. Allah, the Mohammedan appellation of the deity, is still used in the different dialects of these tribes. The Friday is their Sabbath, and though they rank the mother of Jesus as one of the 4 perfect women of the prophet's faith, they look upon her son as an inferior prophet, famous only for his miracles. They maintain a marbut or a priest in every village, believe implicitly in the doctrine of predestination. All right, and then let me move on to evidence number 2 of Islam in Jamaica presence. The history of Muslim resistance in the West Indies. All right, I wanted to let me see here. I wanted to get the proper quote. Right, here we go. The Mandinka, Fula, Susa, Shanti, and Hasachar, most of whom were Muslims. Robert Madden, a settler magistrate in Jamaica, had a slave called Abu Bakr, a Mandinka slave, who authored 2 autobiographical pieces written in Arabic. As the son of a learned family in Islamic jurisprudence from the city of Timbuktu, we learned that he acquired advanced Quranic learning. So strong was Abu Bakr's Islamic teaching that even after 30 years of bondage in Jamaica, he still knew the Quran almost by heart. Like hundreds of other African Muslims, Abu Bakr had different masters and had been baptized as Edward Donnellan, but his name was Edward Donnellan, but he remained faithful to Islam. He is perhaps one of the very few who returned to Africa upon his Manu mission in 1834. Am I being heard, by the way, ladies and gentlemen? Am I being heard?
Yes.
Okay. Madden's records further reveal how even when Muslim slaves were forcibly converted to Christianity, they were actually crypto-Muslims and maintained their beliefs. I had a visit one Sunday morning very lately from 3 Mandingo Negroes, natives of Africa. They could all read and write Arabic, and one of them showed me a Quran written from memory by himself. Beautiful, but written, he assured me, before he became a Christian. I had my doubts on this point. One of them, Benjamin Cochrane, a free Negro, was in the habit of coming to me on Sundays. His history is that of hundreds of others in Jamaica. Cochrane says his father was a chief in the Mandingo country. I have not the time to give you an account of his religious opinions, but though very singular, they were expressed with infinitely more energy and eloquence than his sentiments on the other subjects. He professed la 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 la. Okay, so we know that the Muslims were there. Nobody's saying that they weren't, but we see a predominantly, when it comes to late 18th century to 19th century, we find Islam in Jamaica. There's no shame. Garfield's not hiding no information. I'm just going by what we see as far as the information. All right. I wanted to address something with the Maroons quickly. 2 things I want to address. I want to give a shout out to the sister. What's her name? What's her name? Mr. D. What's her name again? I want to give a shout out to the Black Moses. Everybody knows who I'm talking about, Harriet Tubman. And I wanted to talk about a connection that I see with her and with the struggle in North America before we even go any further. All right, I'm going to touch on something really quickly. It's called the conjure magic and power, the influence of Afro-Atlantic religious practices on slaves. And I wanted to address something that a lot of people might not be aware of. I read it the other night, but I'm going to read it again. African conjurers in slavery rebellions. All right. The New York City Revolt had some revealing parallels with an uprising that took place in 1760 on another British colonial possession, Jamaica. A slave named Tacky, who was claimed to be Jamaican. Hold on 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just see something real quickly. Claiming command over esoteric and magical forces, conjurers were seen as integral to the success of slave revolts. This was definitely the case in 1712 in New York City slave rebellion, which was the most serious slave disturbance up to that time in the British American colonies. It only involved about 28 insurgents. However, this relatively small band killed 10 whites, wounded 12 others, and created a panic throughout the North American colonies. Among the key components in this rebellion was Peter the Doctor, a free African conjurer who rubbed a magical powder onto the clothing of the slaves to reportedly make them invulnerable. Thus emboldened them, the rebels, armed with swords, knives, and guns, set fire to a building in downtown New York City and waited to ambush approaching whites seeking to put out the blaze. This New York City revolt had some revealing parallels with an uprising that took place in 1760 on another British colonial possession, Jamaica. A slave named Tacky, who was claimed to be Coromantine, led a slave rebellion in Jamaica with the aid of a number of Obeah conjurers. As a spiritual practice linked to Akan-speaking West Africans from the Gold Coast region, Obeah was a powerful belief system found particularly among slaves in the British, Danish, and Dutch Caribbean and mainland South American colonies. During the early phases of this revolt, one of Tacky's Obeah men was captured by colonial officials, allowing a window into the world of his unique practice, while at the same time creating a plausible explanation for the events occurring during the New York City Rebellion nearly 50 years earlier. According to a contemporary source, this captured conjurer was also Coromantine or Akan speaking. After being apprehended by British colonial authorities, this Obeah man testified that he, along with his fellow practitioners, administered a powder which, being rubbed on their bodies, was to make them invulnerable. Thus, in both the 1712 New York City Revolt and the 1760 Jamaican conspiracy, powder was rubbed onto slaves, imbuing them with special powers and giving them the confidence to rebel. A definite Akan-speaking presence can be found in the 1712 New York City Revolt. Two of the three extant contemporary accounts of the uprising demonstrate tangible proof that Akan-speaking Africans played active roles in this event. The April 7 to 14, 1712 edition of the Boston Newsletter, which at the time was the only newspaper operating in British North America, reported that some Coromantee Negroes, to the number of 25 or 30, and 2 or 3 Spanish Indians conspired to murder all the Christians there. I'll leave that right there for now, but let me move on because I want to close out this segment because my time is almost up. In my preacher's voice, I want to talk about the great Harriet Tubman. Some call her Moses. Let me try to break this down carefully here. Let me see if I could find it here. For those who don't know, Harriet Tubman was born here in the United States in Maryland. But her family came from West Africa. They were considered Asante. Let me see if I could find this right here. Martin Lake, a fellow slave and friend, I took another pass. Hold on, let me see if I could find it. Harriet Tubman was an illiterate slave born in the Bucktown district of Dorchester County on the eastern shore of Maryland. She escaped to freedom alone in 1849. For the next 11 years, she returned to the South 19 times to lead more than 300 slaves north across the Mason-Dixon line and sometimes into Canada. Let me see if I could find it real quickly. All right, broad Spanish where Harriet Tubman was born. Her parents, Benjamin and Harriet Green Ross, then slaves of Edward Broadus, were the grandchildren of Negroes who had come shackled from Africa in 1725. They were Ashanti, of the region by that name, in what is now central Ghana on the west coast of Africa. And I wanted to give a connection to Nanny, how great these two women were. Two of the greatest women ever in the history of the slavery revolution, of all being captives here in the hells of the Americas. Harriet Tubman and Nanny both were, quote unquote, from the roots of Ashanti. I want to also point out that the culture that we know it, you know, in fact, the Maroons, when we look at the language, even with the names, we have Kojo, which is Monday, the name for Monday, which is Kwadwo. We have Kwesi, which is, we found Kwashi. All these names we found in the Jamaican culture, in the Maroons. They ate pork. They worked obia. They did everything. They played music that was similar to the people in West Africa. Another similarity between the Jamaicans and the Akan included that what Edwards called the prevalence of obi, which is a sort of witchcraft, now often called obia. Edwards argued that, like all nations of Africa, the Jamaican Maroon believed that the older men were wizards or obia men. These obia men were extremely intelligent and would use special herbs and medications to perform weird acts. For example, they would pretend to raise someone from the dead by giving them something to slow their heart down, causing people to believe they were dead. And then the obia man would pretend to resurrect the corpse. This is one of the reasons the Maroons, the most independent and rebellious blacks in Jamaica, tended to come from the Coromantee, one of the most prized group of slaves in Jamaica. They used obia to make others, include planters, believe they had power. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just give an example of what a Coromantee warrior looks like. Take a look at my screen. And this is what he looked like with his gun. A Coromantee free Negro with his gun and his smoke pipe. And look at the little lass. In Jamaica, we call it the machete. The machete, or y'all call it up here. But this is us. This is our history, man. And to claim and to put this on us, that we are Moors, to try to identify. I'm not saying that none were. But to come out completely and say, hey, these people are Moors. We put ourselves at a disadvantage, ladies and gentlemen. We limit ourselves. If you notice, I gave reasons, I gave examples, I gave scholarship. And let me just do this. He also showed a woman that named O.S.I.R.I.S. He brought her up because she had brought up that, you know, the Jamaicans, one of the funniest things, man, is when people have scholarship but they don't look at all the angles to look at what really is going on in the whole culture. let's take a look at something that this lady O.S.I.R.I.S had said, that the Jamaicans, when they signed the treaty, the treaty had said something like, "In the name of God, Amen." So that is proof that they're Muslims. When you know the treaties were not written by Cudgel, it wasn't written by no Jamaican or any Maroon. They wrote it. So if they want to write "in the name of God," that's their prerogative. And I do have evidence, by the way, that although "in the name of God" is written, that the U.S., the people on the U.S. on the slave side, they wrote things, different things that said "in the name of God" also. So it wasn't exclusive that these people wrote that in their treaties and so forth. Also, another charge that she made, the name Sarah, which is Nanny's real name, is an Islamic name. We know Sarah could be a Semitic name because Sarah was Abraham's wife, or one of his concubines, whatever she was, or his half-sister, as some might not know. But Sarah is not a Muslim name per se. You know what I'm saying? And when people are influenced by different things, sometimes you have names that carry on. But she worked Obia, you know what I'm saying? And I am not saying 100% no Moors were there or none of that craziness. I don't get down like that. It's not a definite. But I'm saying the majority of the people were Coromantee. These names, look at this carefully here. Another historian in Afra's assertion that Akan Day names such as Kodjo, Kwao, and Kofi are Arabic. These names are so embedded in the Akan tradition of the Fanti, Coromantee, and Ashanti that in their ancient and cryptic drum poetry and religious verse, one of the aspects of God, Nyan Kopong, or the Great Anansi, also bears Kwaku, the birthday name for those born on Wednesday. And Mother Earth is named Asaseya, the final name being given to females born on Friday. Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Let me see if there's anything else I want to touch on here, because this was a beautiful article. Talked about the Muslims. But we do see Muslims in the 18th, 19th century area, and we do see evidence of that. And trust me, if Muslims are around, you'll know. You'll definitely know. Just like how you had the testimony of Reverend Bridges and Dr. The other guy, he basically told us what they were and what they were doing. So I'll just leave it here for today, man. I did a lot of work here. Kansu, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity. I have to run. I could jump back on in the hangout if anybody have any questions. I do have to go do some fatherly duties. And I just want to say I appreciate everybody for taking the time out to join the hangout and listen to your brother pour his heart out for sweet, sweet Jamaica, man. Let everybody know there's a connection with us all over. I'm not saying Harriet Tubman is directly involved with stuff, but I'm just saying that if her family comes from the Maroons, if her family come from Ashanti, there's a possibility, seeing the root of what the Akans did in Ashanti and the connection. I'm saying that it's a possibility that there's a connection there. All right. So, Brother Kansu, again, my brother, it's been beautiful. It's been an honor. And I'm going to jump off here, but I'm going to sign back on my cell phone. So if anybody have any questions or any comments, we could talk about it. Again, and let me stress it to everybody. I'm not saying no Moors were there. But based on the whole Spain connection, there was nobody traveling. And based on the records of the slave voyages, the first real slaves came after 1581. So I was wrong on my post. I said 1575. So I was off by 6 years. So I can be corrected. So I'm just asking folks, don't put information out. Marcus Garvey's a Moor. Moortown is from the Moors. All these different little claims. That just makes me get perturbed. Go back to the YouTube. Look at what I'm pointing out. And that's my cue. All right, take over. I'm going to jump on my cell phone.
Okay, brother. Much appreciated. Much appreciated, Garfield. Once again, a fantastic job. Great empirical evidence. As you can see, he stated his claim. He made it abundantly clear. And really, it's just simple deduction. You know, you don't have to be a brilliant scholar or something like that. It's just following proper methodology to produce empirical evidence and maintain your logic throughout that. Basically, knowledge, understanding, just the basic, simple to investigating things, and also having integrity as a primary scholar, and a forensic journalist. These are things that you want to employ. What I would like to do, if anyone on the panel, on our esteemed panel, would like to have a discourse in regards to what was just shown, or generally on the subject matter, I yield the floor. Would anyone like to have input on it? Anyone out there? Going once, 2 times, and 3 times we good. So, I like to say myself that there is a paradox with the Moor paradigm. You know, I believe that we do have 2 existing parallels in the Moorish social group. Of course, we know that there is no ethnic group that's called Moor, because the term Moor was synonymously used in Africa as an adjective, and it described phenotypically a group of people, an ethnic group of people that were synonymous with dark-skinned people that were also called Berbers. Okay, and there were in certain regions, primarily the Maghreb region of Africa, which is the northern portion of Africa, primarily Mauritania, Morocco, Algiers, Liberia, Libya, these and other lands, but generally the Maghreb region of northern Africa is what is synonymous with the term Berber/Moor. And for the most part, we're talking 14th century with Moor, and then we're going into your 16th and 17th, where it could have possibly been, well, it was, forgive me, a derogatory term. We also know that the term models was also used and cognate in the Greek language structure, and that's a possibility that it alluded to Moor. There hasn't been any conclusive or exhaustive empirical data to claim that as being true to this point. So let's be fair. To this point, there is no proof on that, but it's ongoing, as linguistical studies are always an ongoing thing, as they corroborate along with anthropology and artifacts. So a lot of those things have to be composite in order to really verify a lot of these things. So out of the auspicity of excellence in scholarship, we can kind of leave that area open. We do know that the language associated with the Moor would be possibly part of the Afro-Asiatic family. We do have some that say Afrasian. I think we're also going to be having a discussion about that linguistically with some people involving O.S.I.R.I.S squad and, of course, Team O.S.I.R.I.S. We'll discuss that, and we'll bring that to the forefront as well. We really want to try to establish quality work, quality research before the people. So once again,
yes,
I do want to any panelists that may want to speak. Go ahead, Garfield.
Yeah, I wanted to make a correction. I'd say O.S.I.R.I.S was what did I say, Danny? I said it was Thursday, I think. It was actually Friday, or it was Friday or Thursday. I made a mistake with that. Just want to make
It's Thursday.
All right, no problem, brother. I appreciate the correction.
That's from
man.
Kwame.
All right, that's what's up. That's what's up. And you know, it's crazy. I want to tell people, man. I mean, to my Jamaican family that's listening. I mean, my brother in the gym today, he approached me to the O.S.I.R.I.S. You know, big up to the O.S.I.R.I.S. and Uhuru. And I just want to say, jerk pork. I used to eat jerk pork in Jamaica, man. Ever since I came to America, I stopped eating pork because I was forced to eat pork by my father. So you know, he didn't like the Rastafarians. So he said, you got to eat pork in my house to live here. So if we didn't eat pork, we couldn't even sing Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in my house, man. We couldn't see Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Naughty Dreadlocks. We couldn't sing that. He would want to kick us out of the house. But jerk pork is a big time thing in the community here, because I'm in New York, I'm in the Bronx. So you know, the Jamaican restaurant, I told them the other day I don't eat pork, and they said, nah, it's what the people want. That's their biggest money maker, and we know that. That's why the Arabs still sell us pork. You know what I'm saying? They're Muslim, but they sell us pork. You know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to point that out, that jerk pork is a big part of the culture, and to see that part of the Muslim culture. You saw I showed references where Muslims are in Jamaica and they practicing even Ramadan. You know what I'm saying? We got testimony of that. So I'm not saying there was no Muslims. So I'm saying if there's influence of people who followed Islam, not saying that all Moors have to be Muslims, but a lot of them were. So you know that they would come this way. So if they were, why would they be eating jerk pork? You know what I'm saying? And why? And then you show different things that they're doing. Obia with Sister Nanny, and I showed a connection with her with Sister Harriet Tubman, just to show that the bloodline is deep, man. And we got warriors today. We got warriors today right now in our culture who still carries on that bloodline. I'm a Maroon by bloodline. You know what I'm saying? I can't say I'm a Moor. You know what I'm saying? I can't say that. As you said, it's not an ethnicity. You know, and I did want to bring up something. I had it on my computer about this Moor stuff. But another time we bring it up. You know, we had the brother from Senegal who came on and testified that it's used just to describe people who are like Arabs. You know what I'm saying? So not saying that Nar doesn't mean Moor, but they use it in that sense to mean Arabs. So some people are running with that information and say, you see, that's us. We're Moors. You know, we got to be careful, ladies and gentlemen. Not because you believe something, you don't research it thoroughly. But take somebody's word from the outside. I ain't got nothing in the mix. You know what I'm saying? I mean, of course, I don't like religion, but at least if I'm corrected, just like my brother Danny just hit me up and correct me. I wasn't right about the Thursday and Friday. I took the correction and stepped back. You know what I'm saying? People got to learn that whenever you believe something, take it from an outsider sometime. Not because I show hatred towards religion. You're not going to take my word. But the fact of the matter is, I ultimately want the truth. This is what's the greatness of Team O.S.I.R.I.S, man. Team O.S.I.R.I.S, we could be in the inbox arguing about crap all day, man. But the bottom line is, we all say we want the truth. No matter what you believe, we want the truth. And that's how everybody should be coming towards scholarship.
Well said, brother. I'm sorry, I'm taking notes. Forgive me. I'm listening and taking notes. I'm always learning, man. Yeah, much appreciated, brother. And that's the most prominent point. We have our esteemed brother Garfield that is a native of Jamaica.
I'm sorry, Kansu. I got a show tonight, 6 p.m. on my blog talk. I'm going to be addressing some of these same issues, and I'm going to be touching on some unity stuff, man. Because at the end of the day, I beat up everybody every day, but I want people to understand there's some things in the community that's really killing us. I don't know if you guys ever heard a lecture by Minister Farrakhan in Newark, New Jersey. I think it was April 4th, 1995. That's the best speech I ever heard the brother give. And what happened is he talked about how Elijah Muhammad told him he can't be left alone with his daughters. And he got offended by that. But then he said he understands why he said it. But look at the African bombard and all these situations with young kids getting abused. He said, Elijah Muhammad said, don't leave your daughters alone at home with any male figure. And the stories we hear right now, it's been manifested from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We got some real filthy niggas in our community, man. Some really filthy niggas. So we might say African bombarder is using his power. Listen, man, I'm from Jamaica, and 99% of the females I've ever had a relationship with was abused. Almost every single one of them was abused as a child. The mother's boyfriend, the uncle, the brother with the boys. I mean, even men with men. I'm telling you. So we got some filthy, nasty niggas out there, man. And we need to protect our children, because these people that are abused, they grow up. You wonder why your woman or your girlfriend can't love you the way she's supposed to, because she was abused. You wonder, as a woman, you wonder why this man can't be affectionate, because he was abused. So this is something, although I'm not cool with Tazariak like that. We got phone numbers, we exchange numbers. I want to give a shout out to that event he's having with Irritated Genie, man. Tazariak got issues personally, but the issue that he's bringing to the forefront is a serious issue that needs to be addressed in public. So whether I'm anti-Hebrew Israelite doctrine and I'm anti-Tazariak for his anti-African statements, on this issue, man, I got to take a step back and say, brah, I'm happy y'all doing this. And I'm supporting this event. It's a Sonnet, a King Simon event. Yeah, it's $20. But I'm glad this is being spoken about in the public. It's a serious issue, man. I'm telling you, and all Latino sisters out there, because I used to be a social worker, man, they tell the same stories I heard about the woman in Jamaica. They've been abused. I had an ex-girlfriend, bruh. She broke her virginity when she was 13 to a nigga that was 35 years old. What the hell is that all about? And this is all over. So we need to concentrate on a lot of issues that we're talking about. The Maroon stuff, I'm all for that. But today I'm going to talk about the Maroon stuff. But I'm going to talk about a lot of different stuff tonight. A lot of different stuff. So peace to everybody out there that's listening, man. I'm not trying to come at nobody for the information, but I'm trying to bring the information to the people to correct misinformation. That's what Team O.S.I.R.I.S is about. We're like the little brother you ain't want to hear from, but hey, you're going to hear from him because he coming with the truth. Peace.
All right, Brother Garfield. Peace, love, power, God manifest. Everybody out there, man, we appreciate you tuning in to Team O.S.I.R.I.S. One soul, infinitely resurrecting in spirit. And like we say, we are on the horizon, and we're going to keep bringing you quality information and proper due diligence as scholars and independent forensic journalists that we are. We're going to continue to do what we do, and we appreciate all the input and the support. So once again, God manifest, peace and love, we out.